Rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So welcome to the Q&A session of the Young Professionals group. I think everybody knows what this session is going to be. It's going to be an open Q&A session. And many of you have received the link to post your questions onto Slido. So how many of you saw the link to Slido? Just real quick. Okay. So that was not a successful project, clearly, but that's all right. Which is okay because I wasn't actually planning on using the Slido much, anyways. So I just asked the board to restructure this session, and they approved. They said I can do whatever I want, and I like that. I like to hear that. Alhamdulillah. So here's what I'm gonna do. I've done many open Q&A sessions, and one of the biggest challenges. There's two challenges, but there's a few challenges. Challenge number one is that in the beginning, people don't have many questions, and then when you start hearing other people's questions, then you start getting ideas sparked. And you're like, oh, I always wondered that too. Oh, I have another question that builds upon that. So coming up with questions in a Q&A session is always a problem because people don't remember the questions that they've had in the past, even though they're important. The second problem with Q&A sessions is that you may have a question and you want to ask it, but then five people's hands go by, you don't write it down, you forgot your question. And the third problem happens in Q&A sessions. This happens even in my WhatsApp group, where I have like 1,000 people asking different questions, is that there are question hogs, and some people just dominate all the questions, and oftentimes the people who are the most courageous and they dominate the questions, my personal view is they're not always the best questions. So what ends up happening is you get a Q&A session where some people are dominating with not so interesting questions, and then other people are like, what the heck kind of question is being asked? Like this gathering is this is a weird session. Like, is this what Islam is about? So you go and you analyze what type of questions people ask across the board, and you think this is the average, and you're like, man, Muslims ask some really weird questions. Sometimes they're not practical, they're not theoretical, they're like complete theoretical. How do I pray on the moon or whatever? Like all sorts of weird stuff. So in order to rectify all three of these concerns, I came up with a model today, which I think is going to help solve most of these three problems. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a category. So what's happened is if you go to any book of Islamic law, or if you go to any book of hadith, like Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, any of them, if you look at the structure, Imam Bukhari had chapter titles, and he had a structure. Imam Abu Hanifa had chapter title structures. Imam Shafi'i, they all had structures in their book, and they usually go through different chapters like purification, all the questions about wudu and ghusl and menstruation and all of that stuff. Then they go through prayer, all the questions about every single type of prayer, istikhara prayer, regular prayer, nafil prayer, janazah prayer, every type of prayer. Then they have another chapter, they go through fasting. Then they have another chapter, they go through Hajj. Then they go through marriage. Then they go through divorce. Then they go through economics. Then they go through politics, political, all of that stuff. So what I decided, I say, you know what? Let me take the big categories that you find, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a category, tell you a few of the most popular questions that I get, which I think are actually good questions. Like, I enjoy answering these type of questions. I'll answer all the questions, inshallah, no problem. But some questions I enjoy answering, some questions I won't tell you, but I may not enjoy it so much. I don't think they're the best questions. And what's going to happen is I'm going to go through a category and then ask if you have any questions in that particular category. And we spend about good 5 to 7 minutes per category. So there's like an even split. And your mind can start thinking and say, do I have any questions? Did I ever have any questions about wudu, or about taking a bath, or about, fiqh of menstruation, or anything like that? And then we stop. That category is over. Go to the next category. Okay? So we're going to try this out, inshallah. So here are the categories that I have. I have purification, prayer, fasting and Ramadan, zakah, Hajj and Umrah, death and burial, dress and grooming, food and drink, marriage and family, divorce and separation, economics, and beliefs. So 12 categories. Okay? So we're going to start with category number 1, like most scholars have started with purification. So these are some of the most common questions that I get, which a lot of Muslims generally need to know. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm just going to read to you the question, and then I'm going to open it up for anyone who wants to ask a question in this category. If you liked one of these questions, you're like, I always wondered that one. You have to repeat the question again, and I'll answer it for you. Or you come up with your own and be like, oh, that question that you just read out loud, it sparked another question on a similar topic that I've always had. So let's try this and see if it works. This is a beta test. Okay? All right, you're all halal guinea pigs on this one. Okay? So bismillah, purification. Common questions that I get. One of them is, can I wipe over my socks for wudu? Second one, can a woman enter the masjid when she's on her menstrual period if she's trying to attend a class or something like that? Number 3, do I need to have wudu if I have a Quran app on my phone or my tablet or my computer and I don't have wudu? Can I use that app to read the Quran? Number 4, do I have to remove nail polish, paint, glue, lotion, oil, hair dye, a ring, a watch, or my makeup before I perform wudu? And number 5, can I urinate while standing? Can I use a public urinal? Is that allowed? Do I have to clean myself before I pray? These are 5 common questions that people generally have in the category of purification, which encompasses wudu, ghusl, cleaning off impurities from your body before you pray, menstruation, what type of water you can use, when you make your wudu, swimming pool water, beach water, all of that stuff. So I'll open it up for only questions on purification. Can someone time? Can you time for me? Put a timer for 5 minutes for now, inshallah. Questions on purification. Anybody has? Yes. Alaikum assalam.
What is the position, the general position or a madhabi position on urinary retention? So someone who cannot.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, urinary incontinence. Yeah. Okay. So urinary incontinence basically means that someone is constantly breaking their wudu because either urine drops are constantly dripping out, or they have like a gas problem and they're constantly gas is coming out, or somehow they're losing their wudu from one of the things that breaks your wudu, and this keeps on happening, and you have to go make wudu again, and then you try to pray, and then you lose your wudu, and you're like, oh, okay, now I gotta go make wudu again. So what's the rule? So the general rule across all schools of thought and across all scholars is that whenever you have a problem like this, there is an exemption, because there's a very clear hadith about this. There was a woman who was having she was having blood coming out from her private parts, but it was not menstrual blood. So the Prophet ﷺ told her, this is an irq. This is a blood vessel that's causing the bleeding to happen. This doesn't count as menstrual blood, which means when you're menstruating, you're not going to be praying. But if you're not menstruating, but you're still bleeding, even if it's from the same part, you're not having your menstrual period. So you still need to pray. So she needed to pray. She needed to make wudu. And what the Prophet ﷺ told her was, make wudu for every prayer. In another narration, make wudu for every prayer, period. Every prayer time. So the general answer is, if you have any type of chronic condition where you're constantly losing your wudu, there is an exception to the rule, but you need to know a few things. Number 1 is that how often is this happening? If this happens every 4 hours, that's not often enough to warrant an exception, because you can make wudu, and then you could hold your wudu for like a good 2 hours, 3 hours. That's more than enough for you to pray, maybe one prayer, maybe even 2 prayers. So the condition that the scholars have set is, if you're losing your wudu to the point where it's happening more than once in one prayer period, so you go make wudu and you wouldn't even be able to perform, you wouldn't be able to keep your wudu because of a chronic condition for that entire prayer period. And this is happening for an entire day, an entire span of 24 hours. every single prayer period, you're breaking your wudu, not normally, in that 24-hour period, then you're in the excuse category. What do you do if you're in the excuse category? You make one wudu for each prayer time. And then you don't worry that your wudu is going to break from that excuse. That's the Hanafi school. Shafi'i school, slightly different. It doesn't really matter. Just giving you one opinion for now. Okay? So hopefully that clarifies things. Other questions on purification? Yes. Okay. My opinion on halal nail polish is that you still shouldn't eat it, even if it's halal. No, I'm just kidding. So many people may not know this. First of all, there's no such thing as halal nail polish, okay? Because there's no haram nail polish and halal nail polish. What you mean is breathable nail polish. Many people don't know I'm the first person actually who wrote an article on Inglot O2M nail polish when it first came out, because Sheikh Muslima actually encouraged me. She asked me this question a long time ago, and she's like, you should write something about it. And I'm like, why don't you write something about it? She's like, no, you write something about it. So I wrote something, and then it became like a really big thing, and then everyone came out with their own brands and all that stuff. And there was so much controversy over my article, and it came in like all the media feeds and everything like that. So originally, my original view in my original article was that if the nail polish is breathable, and breathable meaning that it's water permeable and water is going to seep through, even if it's water vapor, then it's sufficient for that to be considered getting enough water over the entire hands, and then the water vapor is getting over there. And I wrote all of this in my article. Like, it's a really, really old article. Afterwards, I got so much criticism from sisters around the world, saying that this is a fake experiment and you didn't do the experiment properly. I didn't even do the experiment myself. But anyways, so my conclusion now is that it's not my responsibility as a scholar to do the chemistry aspect of the experiment to show what's permeable, water permeable, and what's not water permeable. The simple answer, the theoretical answer is that when you make wudu, depending on how much force you put in the water to get through to the nail, how much you rub, how much water you put on it, how many layers. I learned what a French manicure, whatever, 3 layers, and I learned what a top coat and a base coat, and I didn't want to learn any of this stuff, okay? But I had to somehow learn all of this stuff. It depends how many layers you have. It depends how much water pressure you put on there. So if somebody can show that the amount of water that gets through the polish is sufficient to, like, it would be like putting 1 coat of water on top of your nail, then that's more than enough for wudu. And different brands have different amounts. So every single water permeable nail polish doesn't do the job depending on how much water you use when you make wudu. Some brands are more water permeable, some are less, like Tuesday in Love, right? And I really don't enjoy knowing all this, but Tuesday in Love is one of those brands that has much more water permeability than anything else. And you can also like peel it off, and you don't need to use any, what's it called, like nail polish remover or something. But then people are going to complain. They say, well, Tuesday in Love brand doesn't have the shine color that I'm looking for. It's not as cool, and Inglot O2M is much better, and then the other one is 7861 is better, or whatever it is. So the thing is, the simple answer is, if the water can go through the nail, then it's fine for wudu. And if the water doesn't go through the nail polish, then it's not sufficient for wudu. Okay. Next question on this time. Okay, we'll take a few more minutes, inshallah. Put like 4 more minutes, inshallah. Yeah, but in the back. Yeah.
How do you purify clothing, services, or other items that can be contaminated with impurities like najasa?
Okay, any najasa like urine, blood, vomit, or something like that, if there's clothing on, if it's on your clothing or something, you need to remove it before you perform your prayer. Otherwise, your prayer is not going to be valid. How do you remove it? You remove it any way you can. You can wash it, and then it washes out. You can send it to the dry cleaner, and they can use chemical, they can use vinegar, they can use whatever they want. Anything that gets it out is going to be sufficient to say that that thing is pure. And if there's a stain that remains, like if there's a blood thing, and if you wash your shirt that has some blood drops or whatever, if you wash it with water and then you squeeze it out, but there's still a stain that remains, that's overlooked. And that's because you don't have to use boiling hot water. You don't have to get these blood stains out or whatever it is. The Prophet ﷺ, they had it at that time, and he did not require them to use even boiling hot water or something like that. So using water to squeeze it out or any other way to get it out somehow is going to be sufficient to get rid of the impurity. Okay. Yes. Alaikum assalam. Okay. Oh, I don't remember the rest of that story. She told you to put him up for adoption? Okay. Okay. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. May Allah keep you strong, keep your heart firm. So basically, this is just about dog saliva. I'll repeat it. Yeah, just about dog saliva and how to purify the house from a dog that's been there. So generally, if a dog, came, like I mentioned, like last time, right? Yeah, I think you were there. If dog saliva gets on you, you just need to wash it out, right? A few times. So you just have to go with your general assumption. So there's two things to keep in mind. Number one, how do you clean off the dog saliva? Any way you can. You wash something. You wash a sheet, you wash a pillow cover, whatever it may be, and you get that out. The second thing is, to what extent do you need to clean every single thing in your house, right? Well, why do you care about, like, if there's some impurity in some location of your house, this is not haram. This is not sinful for you. So let's say, for example, somehow for some reason, you got blood on your wall, okay? And you take a bookshelf and you put a bookshelf in front of it, and there was blood behind the bookshelf, whatever, and it's dried up, right? No one's going to ever look behind your bookshelf, right? That blood doesn't affect you as a Muslim. It doesn't affect anyone who walks into your house. It has no negative effect whatsoever. The only time that blood would affect you is if you remove the bookshelf, and if you were touching it, it still wouldn't affect you because the blood doesn't transfer over to you because it's dried. If it was wet, the only time you would care is if it transfers over to you. Now you have impurity on your body. You can't pray when you have impurity on your body. So the reason why I'm saying that is, if you have dry dog saliva somewhere, and if you touched it and it's completely dry and your hand is dry, it's not transferring over to you. It doesn't affect you in any way. So you don't need to worry that, if somehow you have, like, I don't know, some carpet on the floor, right? And you don't pray on that carpet. You just walk around or whatever it is. It's unlikely that dry dog saliva is somehow transferring onto your body, and then when you pray, you have that on your body. That's the only time you would worry about it. So you don't need to purify every single aspect of your house. The only reason you need to purify anything is because if that dry dog saliva, somehow you were wet somehow, and by touching it, the wetness on your hand or your foot caused it to become re-wettened. It's not even a word. But anyways, like become moist again, and then it transfers onto you. Now it becomes a problem because you have impurity on your body. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, alhamdulillah. So that's all right. Should we move to the next topic, or should we? It's actually important. Everyone's is important. Go ahead, say it.
So the nail polish you were mentioning,
Yeah.
it's not see-through. I'm asking from a woman's perspective.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Because you're not allowed to wear it. Yeah.
If the woman were to wear it though, in wudu, the hand, it's a part of the sunnah though, right? It's not a part of the fard of wudu.
No, it's part of the fard. It's part of the requirements of the wudu. Because yes, technically, washing your hands is sunnah. You got that part down. Washing your arms is fard, but your arm is from your elbow all the way to your fingertip. So it is fard part. So it absolutely has to be removed when you're making wudu. So you, when I say you, I say women, not you. All right. So women, they can make wudu and then put nail polish on. It's fine because it doesn't affect their wudu. But if it's not, water is not getting through, they need to remove it before performing wudu again. Okay, unless they're on their period. All right. So I think we should stop purification. We can come back to it, but let's move on to the next topic, inshallah. Prayer. Okay. Common questions I get. Do I have to cover my feet if I'm a woman during prayer? Can I pray inside my car? What is the minimum number of people needed to perform Friday prayer? Like if you're at work or something, can I get some brothers together and perform the Friday prayer? Can I shorten or combine prayers when I'm traveling? These are some of the common questions that I got. So any questions on prayer? Okay. White shirt.
If you happen to miss a false prayer, can you make it up by doing just either qada or make up that prayer somehow?
Yes, if you miss a fard prayer, if you miss a required prayer, it's not that you can. You have to make it up as soon as you're able to, and it's called qada. Now, when you do qada means that you're making up the prayer after the time is already expired. It's a requirement to do it, but know that qada is still sinful because you missed the prayer. So, like, yes, you have to make it up, but you shouldn't think like, oh, I made it up, so it's not a big deal at all. I could just keep doing qada all the time. No. Prayers have to be done in their time. But if you don't do it, yes, you get sin for delaying, but then you have to do qada. And qada is, you shouldn't just skip and be like, oh, I'm already committing one sin. Might as well do 5 more. That's not right. So, yes, you have to make up the prayers. Even if it's been a few days or something and you forgot, as soon as you remember, you make it up. Okay. No sisters. Okay. Who has not asked the question? No, you haven't asked the question, right? Go ahead.
When's the latest you can pray Isha? Is it all the way up until Fajr?
So there's 2 opinions on it, but I think the stronger opinion, my opinion, is that yes, it's all the way up until the start of Fajr. But caveat, it's disliked, it's makruh to delay after midnight, after the middle of the night. So if you're like at a party or something like that, you should pray before midnight. But for some reason, if you delayed, yes, it's still not considered late, but it's preferred and recommended to always do it before midnight. Okay. Yeah.
The one you mentioned about praying in the car, during the earlier routine, sometimes it's not possible to find a spot to pray. So would you say that's okay, or is that?
I'm so glad you asked me this question. So give me a scenario where it's not possible to find a spot to pray.
In terms of say if you're in a public area, like if you're not.
Like let's take Irvine Spectrum,
Yeah.
right? Irvine being one of the top 10 safest cities in the United States. Yeah, so you're in Irvine Spectrum and you can't find a place to pray because it would be unsafe because these Asians, these Chinese and stuff, like these are some dangerous people, right? So what do you think they would do to you? Like what do you think they'd do to you if you prayed outside, like, and they saw you?
But maybe not Irvine Spectrum, but
Like give me an example in the city of Irvine, which happens. I just repeat one more time. Happens to be one of the top 10 safest cities in the entire, perhaps world, but let's just say United States. So what would be a place where it would be dangerous to pray in the city of Irvine?
maybe outside of the city of Irvine. I'm talking about
Like Newport Beach, Beverly Hills. Okay, like let's go to Time Bar. No. So I'm trying to get people to think. I hear this all the time. So now I'm just gonna start my rant. Okay, people go to Irvine Spectrum, and they're like, you know what? I have to pray in my car because it's dangerous. Let's be real. Irvine Spectrum ain't dangerous. Okay, there's no danger whatsoever. The reality is the reason why people want to pray in their car and they don't want to pray outside. Can somebody tell me why? Say it. They're not scared. They're embarrassed. They're embarrassed that someone might look at them. Like that's it. Somebody looked at you. They don't have the eyes of Medusa. Nothing is gonna happen to you. If somebody looked at you and they saw you praying, first of all, most people don't even care. And the people who they don't even know what you're doing. And when they look at you, you should never, ever be embarrassed to be a Muslim. Okay? So I want to make this very clear. Almost everybody who has the idea that I'm going to pray inside of a car, first of all, it is absolutely not acceptable. 100%. There's no scholar in the history of Islam that said you can pray a fard prayer inside your car. Nafil prayer, sure. But a required prayer, I don't know a single scholar ever. So, is there a situation where there'd actually be a real danger? Yes. You're a black Muslim and you happen to be outside the Ku Klux Klan headquarters, right? I can understand that you happen to be there in Alabama and you needed to sit in your car and pray because they're about to kill you. I totally get it. What I don't get is Muslims who are going to Irvine Spectrum, they go into Albertsons and they're like, you know what? I have to be in my car. Why? Because it's dangerous. You can't fool Allah, man. I mean, you can't fool me on this one. It's not danger. You're in an airport. I've prayed in every single airport, like 40 different countries. There's no danger. In fact, I go next to the TSA agent. I'll be like, hey, man, I straight up, like, hey, man, can I pray next to you? They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to pray next to you. And if someone gives me a problem, I feel safer you're next to me. People get all these ideas. They're going to arrest me. They're going to arrest you for praying. I can arrest you for praying. I know there's been a few incidents. They've been reported by CARE. I'm aware of all of that stuff. That is really the exception to the rule. So the general rule is, number one, you can't pray in a car. Number two, if there's a genuine fear for your safety, then yes, you could pray inside the car, but there's almost never a genuine fear. You could almost always find a place to pray that's going to be safe, whether that's in a changing room, in a store, in the mall, or something like that. So you just got to be careful. If there's it's like a real danger, then yes, there's an exception, but usually there's not that danger. Does that help?
As a follow-up to like the
Yeah.
parking lot, just because I've been told like, hey, like, stay away from, praying in a parking lot or things like that.
Why? I mean, obviously, you're not going to pray
Like
in the middle of the parking lot where the cars go. Okay? Yeah, that would be just foolish. That's dangerous. That's just stupid, right? But praying in a parking lot, I know hundreds of Muslims pray in a parking lot. I pray in the parking lot all the time. No one's going to run me over. No one even looks at me. I was actually hoping someone would look at me so I can go talk to them afterwards. Hey, you know what I was doing? I was praying. Here's a pamphlet about Islam. They don't even care. Nobody seems to care at all. So yes, you should pray in a parking lot. You should pray in the park. You should pray in Disneyland. You should pray in Knott's Berry Farm. You should pray every single place that you can pray except the middle of the road. All right? So, who has not asked the question yet? You've not asked the question.
So it is a follow-up on that.
Okay.
And I do pray anywhere in public, whatever. But sometimes, like to back up their position, like praying in a car. Like sometimes for me, even though I'm wearing a skirt, abaya, or whatever, I feel very exposed sometimes when I'm praying in public. Like there's a reason women pray behind men because like we want to be exposed, no one should look at us. It's like doing sujood or doing ruku'. But a lot of times I do feel like very exposed when I'm public and like in sujood. I'm like, okay, well, what if someone looks at me? It's just like kind of a compromising position.
Have you been to ICOI? This masjid right here. Oh, once or twice. Okay. Most masjids, the women pray in the back, right? Where's the entrance for the public? The men, yeah, no. Where's the entrance for the musalla area of the masjid? It's actually behind where the women stand. So if the issue was that they can see you, all the guys walk in and they can see the women in the back. So the reason why they're not standing directly next to you in prayer, that's part of the purpose behind why they're in the back. I'm just saying the idea of I'm concerned that I'm going to be exposed, people will see you. Potential things you can do, you can open the door and you can pray behind your car door, like in a parking lot or something like that. But my point is, this should not be an excuse to say, now I have a valid reason to sit in a car and pray. Because there's two problems with sitting in a car and praying. There's requirements of prayer. Requirement number one is you have to stand if you're able to stand. Requirement number two is you have to face the qibla if you're able to face the qibla. And usually when people pray in a car, they're violating two of the absolute requirements of prayer, which invalidates the entire prayer. So that's why I'm just trying to emphasize this point. Okay.
And my main point is about I pray anywhere, literally in public. So would I be like sinful if someone like looks at me like I'm inappropriate?
You would not be sinful for that. If that's the place you have for prayer, you are not sinful for that. So, okay. I'm trying to emphasize some of these points. I understand people have, sensitivities and all that stuff. I was somebody who was afraid to pray all the time in public. Okay, and then it took me a long time. I like literally forced myself to like go into a park, and I'm like, I'm gonna stand here, I'm gonna pray, and like I'm hoping nobody watches me, and I'm gonna be prepared. If they watch me, it's okay, nothing's gonna happen. It took time because I grew up being told never pray in public. People will look at you. I've heard every excuse in the book. You're in danger. You're giving a bad image to Islam because you shouldn't be showing that you're praying, and then you're doing negative. You're doing anti-dawah. You're making Islam look bad. You're doing this. You're doing that. I've heard every excuse in the book, and I believe that stuff. And then I realized all of that was wrong, completely wrong. So I understand how people struggle with this, but I'm very passionate about trying to convince people that number one, you got to do this. You got to push yourself and do it. And number two, these are flimsy excuses that we convince ourselves are strong because we're already inclined towards that position. So, you have to pardon me. Have you asked a question? No, go ahead.
I was reading a bit at least about the time that Sheikh Muhammad he combined two prayers without excuse of travel or war. From what I read, it was Sahih Hadith. So I was wondering what you think of the authenticity and where do you draw the line of like, am I doing qada or can I use that as a rukhsah?
Okay, so the question is there a hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, combined two prayers in one time, and there was no travel, there was no rain, there was no other reason? This hadith is in Sahih Muslim, and it's a permutation of one of the other hadith that Imam Muslim put in there. So Imam Muslim has very strict criteria, and almost all of the hadiths in his book are authentic. But the scholars gave an interpretation to that, and they said, what did that mean specifically? So people misunderstood the meaning. When he said, when he used to travel, when he combined, he was praying two different prayers in the time of the prayer for one of them. But in this specific hadith, he was praying two prayers back to back, Zuhr at the end of the time for Zuhr, and Asr right at the beginning of the time for Asr. So both prayers were performed in the correct time, but they were prayed back to back. So that was to make his life easier. But what he did in travel was different than what he did in this particular hadith. Okay? You haven't asked the question? Okay, go ahead.
Sometimes during work, like I once used to go like on the clock, but sometimes I'll like rush through it a little bit. And then I think like when I go pray or not like sincerely, then like rush through it and have it on time. But like which one is better? Because I know you said it's still simple to.
Yeah. So if you have to choose, if you can make wudu in advance and all that stuff, if you have to choose praying on time and rushing a little bit versus praying late and then slowing it down a little bit more, praying on time is more important. And if you want to do another additional prayer afterwards, just to kind of, do it again or whatever, you can do that. But praying on time is more important, even if you're rushing it a little bit. Okay. Yeah, let's go to the next category, inshallah. All right, next category is fasting and Ramadan. Some common questions. How do I perform i'tikaf in the masjid? Which days should I fast besides the month of Ramadan? Does a wet dream or masturbation or intercourse break my fast? Intercourse, obviously, most people know that part. But the first two, people have question. Can I swim while fasting? If I get an injection of medicine, insulin, or vaccine, will it break my fast? How sick do I need to be to break my fast? Does vomiting break my fast? Should I fast while I'm traveling? Does a blood test break my fast? And yeah, there's a few more, but these are some of the common questions. So fasting in Ramadan questions. Were we on brothers or sisters now? We're on sisters, right? So brothers. You already. Who has not asked the question? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. It's not on fasting. You're saving it. Okay. Okay. If there's nobody else, you can just ask again. I'm just trying to call on people who have not asked so many questions. So you haven't asked the question, right? Yeah, Tony, go ahead. Salam.
So I was talking to his brother about fasting, and he told me, I just want to clarify, but he said that one of the ways he or throughout God is that he sleeps at day.
Very Gulf Arab thing to do. But yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if that counts as anything.
Yeah, so it's a common question. In many countries, Ramadan becomes like you sleep most of the day and you like party and do family stuff like most of the night. Is it a good practice for really feeling Ramadan and getting the proper reward? Maybe your reward is reduced to the extent that you didn't really put much effort into it. Does it still count as fasting? Yes, it still counts. So if you, out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you fulfill the outward aspect of the fasting and there's some little level involved of difficulty, it still counts. He doesn't technically need to make it up again, but that's not a good practice to get the full feeling of the fast. Okay, so other questions from sisters? Fasting in Ramadan? Yeah. If the blood touching you breaks your fast? I'm not aware of those hadiths. I've not come across that before. Yeah, no, keep going. Okay, this is yeah. So that one I've not heard. I never heard anyone ask that before, but I've heard it also when it comes to wudu. So let me make two things very clear. There's nothing that you can touch or get on your body that's gonna break your wudu or that's gonna break your fast. So you can get urine, blood, vomit. You can be drenched in it. It's not gonna break your fast. You can be drenched in it and you can't pray, but you can change all your clothes, put on new clothes again. It doesn't break your wudu. So many people they think like, oh, if I have a baby and I was changing the baby's diapers, this is such a common question. Changing the baby's diapers and I accidentally touched some poop. It doesn't break your wudu. Yes, you need to clean your hand before you can pray, but it doesn't affect your wudu because wudu means you have to redo the whole wudu again. So there's a confusion between two things. One of them is wudu, which is symbolic purification, involving some physical purification, and then there's removing najasa or impurities. They're two separate categories. One doesn't affect the other one. So if you get blood, urine, vomit all over you, it doesn't break your wudu. Change your shirt, change your pant, whatever it is, change your clothes, your wudu is still intact. Okay? So same thing with fasting. Nothing that I know that I can think of right now that could get on you somehow that could potentially break your fast. Things that break your fast are food, drink, and intercourse, or anything connected to one of these three categories. Okay. All right. In the back. Yeah, go.
So what constitutes traveling? Like if I'm traveling, like not a crazy distance, but it doesn't meet that threshold, it's for recreational purposes. I literally just like I go snowboarding, and so like you get really hungry and this and that. But it hits that distance, but like I'm going to have a choice to stay on park. So is that like how should I approach that in terms of not having to fast?
Yeah. Got it. So the question is, it's Ramadan, you have to fast, but you're traveling. When you're traveling, the distance, that's actual travel. Let's say from here to San Francisco, but you're going for recreational purposes. You're not going for like a business trip or something. Are you allowed to not fast? And the answer is, you're allowed to, but if travel is easy for you, it's better to fast. That's the general rule. So yes, you're allowed to, but it's better to fast. Yeah. Other questions on fasting? You've not asked questions. Yes, you can get your blood drawn. Yeah. If it's going to weaken you significantly, then it's disliked. Yeah, but otherwise, yes, blood draw does not affect the fast because it's not nourishing you. It's actually taking out from you. So what breaks your fast is something going in, not something coming out. That you cannot do, because now that's different than a vaccine. Because IV hydration, you're injecting something that nourishes your body, so it's like drinking water. So no, that will break your fast. Okay, move on to the next category. Let's move on to the next category. We can come back, today or some other day. All right, zakah. Next category is zakah. Do I get more reward for paying my zakah in Ramadan? Can I spread my zakah payments over time? Do I have to pay zakah on employee stock options if they're vested, or if they're qualified, or they're restricted stock options? Do I pay zakah on the purchase price, the market value, or the future selling price of investments like stocks? Do I have to pay zakah on my 401k or my retirement account if I can't access the money until I retire? Can I give my zakah to a poor non-Muslim? Do I have to pay zakah on money that I've set aside for future expenses like college, marriage, or family vacation? Can I pay zakah on a Gregorian date every year instead of using the Islamic calendar? Because these are common questions on zakah. So, what's question on zakah? Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
So if my father has a habit that he pays for it since I was a child, now do I have to pay it for myself, or he can still pay it for me on my behalf?
So it's your requirement. It's a requirement when you're an adult that you're supposed to pay it on your own. But if he pays it on your behalf, it does count as a gift to him, to you, that he's given you, and it's valid and it counts, and then you won't have to pay it. As long as you have no expectation that he's going to do it, but if he's doing it anyways, it counts for you. Yeah. So, any question? Yeah. Who has not asked? No, sorry, you have not asked. Yes. Yes. So some people have made the argument that since you can't access the money, then you don't have to pay on it. That's a mistake, though, because even though you can't withdraw the money, you can incidentally withdraw the money. So, which means that if you're buying your first home, if you lose your job, if you transfer job, you can roll it over to another 401k. You could roll it over to an IRA. There's so many different ways. So it is technically your money, and the money is not stuck anywhere. It's actually being traded by the funds that you had set up. So yes, you have to pay zakah on the 401k or the IRA or any other retirement plans, because even though, so you voluntarily gave up access to it in order for a tax break and benefit. So I have a whole article written on it, but yeah, so you basically do have to pay every year zakah on the retirement plan because you voluntarily gave up access to it. It's still your money, and it belongs to you. Yeah. So the smart thing would be you use your liquid funds, not in the fund, to pay for it every single year. That's what you do. You pay from the amount that you have in your checking account. Yeah. And what people usually will ask is they'll say, well, it keeps growing and it's so much. I don't have enough liquid funds to, pay my zakah without withdrawing it, and then you have to pay interest to yourself, and you be penalized, and you have to pay interest back to yourself, which is technically halal because there's no such thing as interest to yourself. But anyways, the answer is don't put so much money every single year in your 401k that you're not able to pay zakah on it. So you reduce the amount that you're going to be putting in, so you have enough liquid money at the end of the year to be able to pay zakah on your 401k. Okay, so we can talk afterwards, inshallah. Zakah. You haven't asked, right? You've asked? Oh, you haven't. Go ahead.
Do you have any recommendations for riba or interest-free banks?
Like, okay, there's no such thing as a bank that's not going to use your money to loan it out on riba. But in terms of collecting riba, which gives you a 0% free checking account, there's several. I know Chase is one, but I don't know. Like, there's probably some other ones as well.
So I guess my question is, how can I avoid riba? Because I was attending this class, and we're reading a book, and it's tafsir of the ayat about riba, and it's very scary. Like the only.
Let's leave that for economics. That's another section. So this is only zakah for now. We will get to that, inshallah, hopefully. Zakah question.
Do I need to pay zakat on a gold watch that I wear?
Okay. So there are three opinions on this. To make it short, my view is that if this is a significant amount of gold, it's recommended but not required to pay the zakah on jewelry because it falls in the category of jewelry. So recommended but not required to pay on. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, you didn't ask, right? Go ahead.
What about like that's saved up for something that you're going to pay for in the future, say like college or like further education, whatever it might be?
Did you get inspired by the question that I read? My strategy is working. Alhamdulillah, good. No, this is such a common misconception. So people are like, well, I'm saving up this money, to get married. You don't know when you're going to get married. It could be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And you may, if you needed that money for something else, you would go ahead and you dig into that money, right? So some people are like, I put it aside in a separate envelope and I put it in my closet, like under a special place. Doesn't matter. It's still your money. As long as this money is in your ownership and you have access to it, even incidental access, right? It belongs to you. You got to pay zakah on it. So no, you can't set aside for any future expense until you actually pay it. So if you like, let's say you have tuition coming up and you're like, well, my tuition is due in 4 months and my zakah is due in 1 month. I'm going to have to pay this tuition. So do I pay zakah on this amount or I don't? And the answer is you're supposed to pay zakah on this unless you prepay your tuition. Pay your tuition now, and then you don't have to pay on that because it's coming up anyways. So if you don't pay it, if it's in your ownership and it's in your control and you have access to it, you have to pay zakah on it, right? If it's saving and it's in the form of productive wealth. Okay. Yes. Okay. So, yes, there's two types of debt. There is debt that's short-term debt that's due right now, meaning you have to pay this debt off. And as soon as you get the money, you're going to pay this loan off or somebody that you had to somebody else. You take the amount of money you have. So let's say you have $10,000 in the bank. You're supposed to pay zakah on that after 1 year. And then you owe this other person $7,000 and you're about to pay them off. For some reason, I don't know why you're delaying. You're going to pay them off in like 1 month. You're $3,000. Once you pay off that debt, you're below the nisab, the minimum amount for paying zakah. You will not have to pay zakah. But there's also long-term debt. Long-term debt is somebody goes and buys a house in Irvine. Okay, somebody buys a shack in Irvine for $1 million. You get like a 1-bedroom in Irvine, So you go and you buy that and you take a loan. So you owe $1 million. And in your bank account, you have $500,000 and you're driving a Ferrari and you're like, but I'm in debt for $1 million. You will never be paying zakah for 30 years and you're still pulling up in your Ferrari. That would make no sense whatsoever. So you're only allowed to subtract short-term debt that is due right now and you intend to pay it off right now. You can subtract it. Long-term debt is never subtracted for the purpose of zakah avoidance. Make sense? Okay. You want to go next? Oh, okay, time. Yeah, I think you want to get to marriage, right? I heard everyone wants to get to marriage. That's why. Okay. So, all right. Hajj and Umrah. I think we're just gonna skip Hajj and Umrah. Okay, skip that category. All right, death and burial is another category. I'll just take one question on each. Okay, I'll read you the questions. Can I withdraw or withhold life-sustaining care? Like, can you unplug a family member if they're on life support? What do I do if I miscarried a fetus or a baby? Can women attend a funeral or can women visit a graveyard? Can I pray over a person, meaning janazah prayer, over a person who committed suicide? Can I attend the funeral of a non-Muslim? And can non-Muslims attend the funeral of a Muslim? And how do I perform the janazah funeral prayer? Okay, so these are some of the common questions. So I'll just take one and one on death and burial. Right? Who really has a really important question on death and burial? Just, oh, you want so
it's not my question, but I heard people react to the one.
No, you should never assume. just because they're maybe they just got shocked with the word suicide. So, does anyone want to actually ask that question? Who actually has a question on death and burial? Like really wants to ask it. You want to ask it? You take it. He's taking. Okay. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, he did not perform the funeral prayer over some Muslim who committed suicide. And he also did not perform the funeral prayer over someone who died with debt and they were not paying off their debts. But he also said specifically, he told the Sahaba, he said, "You guys pray over him, but I will not." Why did he do that? He would always lead the funeral prayer. He wanted to discourage people from these two bad practices because he wanted to make people realize how serious of a wrong this is. They should not be doing that. Suicide being, forbidden and haram. So he wanted to set an example in the community that, hey, this is such a serious thing that if somebody dies in this case, I will not show up for their funeral prayer. But it doesn't mean that nobody's performing the funeral prayer. So that was his way of kind of balancing between, yeah, the person's still a Muslim at the end of the day, and you still have a responsibility towards your brother or sister in Islam. But as a leader in the Muslim community, I will not show up. So the Muslim leader generally is not supposed to show up, but the other people will perform the prayer still for someone who commits suicide. Anyone else? That's yeah. Hmm. Hmm. How do we view that? Basically, is the question. The question is how do we view? Yeah. So again, I'm going to give you a super short answer. Okay, the longest short answer I can give. Okay, so there are many hadiths, statements of the Prophet peace be upon him that talked about the person who commits suicide is going to be in the hellfire. Right. There's also hadith which talk about a person who imprisoned a cat and didn't feed it and it died of starvation. That person is going to be in the hellfire. Right? So what it's doing is sometimes when the Prophet is saying stuff like this, he's telling you that this is something that's sinful. It's something that's very, very wrong, and it could lead you down the path to the hellfire. He's not saying that because of these actions, they're sinful, you automatically 100% go straight to the hellfire like a disbeliever. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that the person who commits suicide, they've done something wrong. Sometimes they could have an excuse in the sight of Allah. If someone had a very serious mental illness that's bordering on insanity, then those people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will either their reduce their accountability to the extent that they were not in control of what they were doing. And we're not supposed to make judgments this way or that way. You could say we leave their judgment up to Allah and we say we know the action was wrong. That's clear cut. But we don't know this person's circumstance. We leave them up to the mercy of Allah. So we should never say, oh, this person definitely had a mental illness. Because I've heard this from some mental health professionals. They say everyone who commits suicide has a mental illness and they're not going to be responsible. Sorry, that's not what Islam teaches. But Islam does teach that if someone does have that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to hold that person responsible. So we leave the judgment to Allah and we just judge by our general principles. And that could be some sense of solace and comfort that we leave the judging to Allah rather than to us. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next. Dress and grooming. All right. So should a woman cover her head when reciting the Quran? Can I get a tattoo or a semi-permanent tattoo when the ink eventually disappears? Can I get a henna or a sticker tattoo? What type of jewelry can men wear? Can they wear necklaces and stuff like that? Can I use hair regrowth products or get a hair transplant? Are ear piercings and nose piercings allowed? Can I get cosmetic surgery like liposuction or get a nose job? Can I get non-surgical procedures like Botox injections? Um, what part of the body must a woman cover in front of another woman? What about a man to another man? Can I trim the hair on my eyebrows? Can I pluck, wax, shave, or thread them? Can I bleach them? Can I laminate or tint them with semi-permanent dye? Right, which is called. It just eludes me right now. What's that procedure called? Microblading. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, some examples of dressing grooming. So we'll start with the brothers because I know they're really big on this stuff. So, brothers, have any questions in the back? Yeah, gym locker rooms. You gotta close your eyes, bro. You gotta like. It's better to just not go in there. It's horrible. It's like 80-year-old men just walking around naked. This is like the. This is why you should pay extra for this gym downstairs, man. And it's only older. It's not haram to be in the area. You just gotta look. You gotta like look away. You-
Let's say, for example, I mean, there's differences between what the auras for me. Personally, I go above the belly button and below me. Like, I don't. So, what about around this guy? Like, can I wear, like, if I'm playing soccer or something, can I wear shorts and, happen?
so the same aura opinion that you follow is the one that you do around guys, around everyone.
Because I saw Hadith, he had like his thigh showing, and then he covered it when a specific Sahaba came in because he was like, this guy's not. But like with whoever he was sitting with before, his upper thigh was like it's not his upper thigh, but like above his knee, his thigh was showing. So like,
So let me ask you this question.
what was your opinion?
So I'll tell you my opinion in a moment. Let me ask you this then. So if you said your opinion on the aura is above the navel and below the knee, after you read that hadith, did you change your opinion or not?
It's not an opinion. It's like a lot of things. There's a big difference in opinion. I just think
I mean, that's just your practice, basically. Yeah, yeah. Got it, got it. Okay. So most scholars did not take that hadith at face value and said it was not referring to his knee being completely uncovered, meaning bare. It meant that he was still wearing some other clothing on top and he covered it with something else. So basically, whatever opinion you're practicing in your thing, you're not really practicing that in front of women. You're practicing that in public in general. So the same thing applies to guys. So you should follow the same principle.
the ring we do. So I first had
Now you can't sneak in a second question. Yeah, that's it. No, it doesn't matter if you said two. No one has gotten two questions so far. All right. Any sisters have any questions on anyone else who's not asked the question?
I have one regarding hijab and is it permissible to not wear it in front of because I've heard it only with parents non-Muslim that you have to wear it in front of. But people have different opinions on it.
Who has a different opinion on this?
No, so many people say different things.
Like people who actually studied Islam, or like people who? I know a lot of people say a lot of stuff. So what did you hear? I'm curious to know what did you hear.
Specifics like step siblings,
So okay,
stepbrothers.
got it. Okay, so mahram means very close relative that you could never marry no matter what, right? Parents, children, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, niece, nephew, right? So these people, yes, you have to wear hijab in front of them. I mean, these people you don't have to wear hijab in front of them. Everyone else, not in this list, you have to wear hijab in front of them. So that applies to step. That applies to everybody else. That's not that's not your mahram. That's the answer. Does that clarify it? Okay. Okay. Omar.
What is the ruling on beards? I've seen too many people, like brother with a beard and brother with no beard. Oh, you're doing haram, and you punish,
Okay.
it's
Yeah, yeah. So the majority of scholars, like over 95%, have said that it's a requirement for men to keep some type of beard. And the minimum requirement for a beard is the facial hair that grows, you know, on your chin, uh, mainly, right? And obviously, you guys understand what a beard is. But the length doesn't matter. So it can be any length. There's only one minor opinion of one of the statements of Imam Shafi'i which allowed and said it's makruh or disliked to not keep a beard, right? And that's like the minimum. So it's either haram to shave or at minimum it's makruh. It's like disliked. So almost everyone has said that you must keep a beard. Guys must keep some type of beard at minimum, regardless of the amount of how big it is. And that's the opinion that I follow as well.
Is there any exception to that?
The only exception would be where you can't get an exception. So if you are a surgeon and there's a significant risk of infection that's going to result in you somehow having facial hair or something like that, I can't imagine this, then there might be an exception. You can almost always get an exception. I know people in the army, they joined the army, so you must shave your beard. Wrote them a letter, they fought it, they were given exemption. You're a cafeteria worker and you got like these beard nets and stuff that you can wear. There's almost always an exception, maybe an exemption. The only exception could be like a medical illness. You have something growing underneath and you need to shave it off because it's some kind of skin condition or something like that. These would be the categories of exceptions, right? It's almost like falls in a similar category to wearing silk. Men are not allowed to wear silk, right? It's part of dress and grooming. But some of the Sahaba, they wore silk because they had a skin condition. So they were given an exemption. So it's going to be in that category. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. um, so, yes, the minimum is that you have to have your navel to your knees covered in front of other women, and obviously the other parts that you would want to cover. But it's a pretty low standard, so it's navel to the knees. Need to be covered. So you don't want to be wearing short shorts in front of other girls either, or like a bikini or something like that. Okay. This is what the scholars technically say: navel to the knees. But obviously, you want to do more than that, right? So let's leave it at that. All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So yeah, generally removal of the unibrow part, the connection part, is generally permissible. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. I will also try to be serious in the answer. Yeah. So lesbian or trans person. Yeah. So no, there's still no relaxation in the rules of hijab, because number one, in Islam we follow the rules of biological gender, not of um, self-identified or hormoned or surgical gender. So yeah, that was when it comes to biological sex, biological gender. I like to use the word biological gender, and yeah, lesbian, same thing. And there's the reason behind it. The reason behind it is the assumption is that, well, this person has no attraction, so therefore we can. Actually, no, you're talking about a different situation. Yeah. You're talking about different. So your question is, should you wear the hijab in front of a girl? Um, this okay. So the technical answer is you don't technically have to. The question is, should you? Right? If you think this particular person has an attraction to you, then you should. If you think this particular person is not really that attractive or something, then you don't need to worry about it. Right? The reason is the majority of people, because number one, from an Islamic perspective, this is viewed as an aberrant or abnormal feeling. Okay, abnormal, unnatural, whatever term you want to use for it. The second thing is that according to self-identification statistics, the majority of people who are gay or lesbian actually identify as bisexual, which means that they're not only attracted to you, they're going to be attracted to other people as well. So the concern is not as high because there's a swinging of both ways. Get it? Okay. Always use the rules based on biological gender. So whatever that person's biological gender is, person's chromosomes don't change. XX or XY. Based on their chromosome, or sometimes it's a third chromosome. But outside of that, based on their chromosomes, that is what you're gonna use the rules of hijab for. Right? Same thing when it comes to prayer place. Same thing when it comes to anything that is a gender segregated or gender-based rule, inheritance, whatever it may be. Yeah. All right, we go next category. All right, I know we're not married yet because this guy's getting impatient. All right, food and drink. All right, can I eat cheese which was made from rennet that came from an animal like pork, like Doritos, which have pork rennet? Sorry to break it to you guys. All right. Can I consume products with alcohol like kombucha, vanilla extract, soy sauce, rice wine vinegar, non-alcoholic beer? Can I use products that have alcohol in them like cologne or hand sanitizer? Should I ask a Muslim host or store whether their meat is halal when I go and eat at their house? What parts of an animal can I eat? Do I have to sit when drinking water? I don't know when I came up with that one. But anyways, it is a question. All right, so these are some of the questions on food and drink. You want to ask about food and drink? Or like, forget it, just get to marriage. Okay, in the back. Can you drink de-alcoholized wine if the alcohol has been removed? Yes, you can. Yeah.
Kosher, is that okay for us? Because I know some people say it, some people say no.
So depends on the standard of kosher. The general answer is yes, because it's the meat of the Jews and Christians, but who are actually applying their rules. So the general answer is yes, but sometimes you got to look at the kosher standard. Sometimes the kosher standard is very, very lax, and there's four main different types of Jews nowadays. There are Reform Jews, which are ultra liberal. There are conservative Jews, which ironically are liberal, and then there are Orthodox Jews, which are conservative, and then there are ultra Orthodox Jews. So you have to kind of ultra Orthodox is actually quite safe, and if you ever see the symbol with the OU, Orthodox Union, that's all good. Yeah. Who hasn't asked in a while? One of you two haven't asked Adam. Go ahead. Okay. So scholars differ big time nowadays on this. I have a debate recently done. It's on your YouTube channel with Sheikh Tariq Ata, who says that you don't have to. You can just you can eat anywhere if it's not it's not halal certified. Whereas my view is that you can't. You have to eat only halal certified meat. So there's difference of opinion. It's a long answer. If you're asking for my personal view, I believe you must only eat zabiha, slaughtered, halal certified meat. But some scholars differ. Okay. All right. Anyone else? Yeah. Kombucha is halal as long as it's not the intoxicating version of it, which is usually not found in America. Yeah, there's a Vice article on one guy who tested to see if he could get high off of kombucha or get drunk off of kombucha. Pretty interesting experiment. So he was vomiting, he got really sick, but he did not get intoxicated. So generally, all the kombucha that's legal that you can buy in the store without having an ID all of that stuff it's halal, because it doesn't have alcohol content that goes over and can get you drunk. Okay, even though it has some level of fermentation alcohol in it. Yes. Doritos question. So Sheikh Yasser Qadi wrote an article a long time ago on this, and it was convincing. So the amount of rennet is a substance that's required in the coagulation and production of cheese. It can either come from a vegetable source, an animal source, like bovine, cow, or it can come from a porcine source, like pork. So if it comes from a porcine or pork source, which oftentimes it does, some of it does, some flavors of Doritos does as well. What happens is if you go and you analyze what extent of that rennet was used in the total all production of cheese, it's like less than 0.001% of that entire product. So that is generally considered to be so minuscule that it can be completely ruled out, as in even it coming from that source, you can say that it's okay to eat it because it's not even a fraction of a percent. That's different from gelatin coming from a pork source because the amount of gelatin is not at that level. So generally, although many scholars say it's not allowed, there's a strong opinion which says it's allowed. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and many others, Sheikh Yasser Qadi being one of the famous modern day ones, and that's my personal view as well, is that it's allowed. Okay. Yes. Okay. So you cooking with alcohol is forbidden because you're not allowed to have alcohol in your house. You're not allowed to buy it, you're not allowed to have it. But if someone else is cooking with alcohol, if it evaporates out, completely allowed. If it doesn't evaporate out, but the complete substance has been mixed such that it cannot intoxicate you no matter how much you have of it, like you cannot have enough beer battered fish that you would die of fish overdose before you became a little bit intoxicated, technically it's allowed, although the majority of scholars say that you still shouldn't have it. So to be on the safe side, it's better to avoid. My personal opinion is that it's allowed theoretically, but it's best to avoid. Okay. In the back. So supplements coated in gelatin capsules. Scholars differ on the gelatin issue, whether there's transformation or no transformation. My view is that there's not a significant transformation that takes place. Therefore, gelatin that comes from a porcine source, pork source, is not allowed to consume. It's also Sheikh Yasser Qadi's opinion and many, many other people. Some people differ, Sheikh Qaradawi and others, they differ and they said it's allowed. Based on my view and the view of the majority of scholars, that it's not allowed for you to consume that, when can you make an exception to the rule? An exception to the rule is when there's a medical necessity. If you have a very important medicine that you have to take and it's significantly impacting your life, you can make an exception and take that pill. A multivitamin, do you say multivitamin? But what's inside? The multivitamin? Yeah. So multivitamin, the thing is you can only take an exception to the rule when there's no alternative and it's significantly impairing life function if you don't take it. If you don't take a multivitamin, it's not going to make you that sick. And you can always find a multivitamin in a vegan capsule, in a vegetarian capsule, in a fish capsule, even with bovine capsules rather than pork capsules. So because there's so many alternatives, this would not be allowed. Okay. All right. Should we move on to the next one? All right. Marriage and family. There we go. We've arrived. All right. Questions. Can I defer or delay paying part of the dower, the mahr, for marriage? Do I have to financially support my parents and other family members? It's not marriage, but that counts as family. So there's family questions. Does my spouse have to serve my parents or even visit my parents? What types of birth control can a couple use? Is permanent contraception or sterilization allowed? These are just some examples. Okay, marriage questions. Tony.
So you kind of know about my previous situation now, I don't to avoid that again.
Honestly, I forgot, bro. I know you well, but alhamdulillah, I forgot, man. Whatever it was.
How am I gonna say? Because eventually I'm going to put myself out there again, but to avoid any culture clash from like because I know that Arabs and they kind of like to stick with each other in certain aspects. And they will look at someone like me, like who's a convert, they will just say, like respectfully and whatnot. So how would I think I talked to a brother about this, and he said that if the parents are saying, to you just because of all like cultural differences and whatnot, then you are allowed to go to a sheikh, and a sheikh would overrule that depending.
Mm.
I don't know how true that is.
Mm.
Can you clarify that?
Okay. So your question is basically about wali override for bad excuses. Yeah, for poor excuses. It's a common question. So there are two opinions when it comes to wali. So wali is the girl's father or closest male relative in the absence of a father, being a requirement for the validity of a marriage contract in Islam. Uh, According to three of the schools of thought, we talked about madhabs last time, so you guys kind of know what we're talking about. According to three of those schools, it's a requirement. According to the Hanafi school, it's not a requirement for a valid marriage, contract. Um, but it's still a recommendation. So in this case, what I would suggest is if the only reason is somebody's ethnicity and it's not a valid reason to just reject somebody based on their ethnicity, you can, after consulting with a wise person like a scholar or something like that, you can, after reasoning with the wali and all that stuff, you can actually override the wali and still proceed with that marriage, and it would be considered a valid marriage. Okay. With one caveat, let me just mention the caveat. So the Hanafi school opinion technically is that this only is allowed if the person is a suitable match. So assuming that in all other aspects the person is a suitable match, but the only thing they're complaining about is either race or location or language or something that's not a real element of suitability, what's called kafa'a, then it's allowed. Okay. Marriage questions, yeah.
I'm wondering about like sterilization and if there is any way that it is permissible, even if it's like vasectomies or getting like tubes tied, even if it is reversible with a high chance of unlikeliness. Is there any like
When you say high chance of unlikeliness, you mean high chance of reversing, unlikeliness of reversing it?
yeah,
Yeah,
it is reversible,
reconnecting.
But it's a high
Yeah,
chance.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there any like scenario where it is permissible or mental health or
Oh, yeah. So sometimes mental health can really be abused a lot. So I don't, so I want to clarify. It is allowed when there is a and like clear and probable danger. Okay, the danger usually means like a physical danger. Um, Getting stressed out is not a physical danger, but if someone really has a significant serious condition where they're going to self-harm or something like that, then that could be a factor. It could be a factor. But yeah, so it's only allowed in the case irreversible contraception, or mostly irreversible contraception is only allowed in the case where somebody was told by qualified medical practitioners that if you have one more baby after this, you're most likely not gonna survive, or something, or the baby's not gonna survive. In that case, then yes, it would be legitimate. Okay. Otherwise, it's generally not allowed. Yeah.
The question like regarding adoption, is that in the family?
Adoption, yes, it fits in the family category. Yes.
So I understand like obviously adopting a child is like great act, but I feel like it's potentially a little disincentivizing in terms of like, let's say you and your wife adopt a girl, eventually you're never gonna become a son, and then if you guys adopt a boy, you would have to cover up potentially a certain amount of time, and this is assuming you adopt somebody like past like a young age where like there's no feedings or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So in light of that, is there like kind of like, I don't know, difference of opinion here that the need is greater than like the initial ruling. You know what I mean?
So if you can basically, I guess your question is, if there's a need for adoption in society, can you overrule the rules of hijab because it would cause a significant um, discomfort and difficult living situation? Is that the question?
Whether it's the our society or a society that's struggling and there are a lot of Muslims, whatever, and then you adopt from that region. I don't know either scenario.
Yeah. So let me think how to answer this. There's like one or two scholars that had the view um, that you can breastfeed after 2 years at a later date and still create mahramiyah. It's generally considered to be a very weak view. I personally consider it to be a weak view. It's the view of Aisha radiallahu anha, and it's the view of Ibn Taymiyyah. But I generally believe it's a weak view. So my personal opinion is, in a situation like this, we shouldn't apply that view. Instead, we should just say, you know what? If that's the situation in society, the community should say, hey, it's our responsibility to take care of these children. And once they grow up, they're going to be on their own. And that's perfectly fine. And we, let them reintegrate back into society, however it is, despite whatever, you know, little discomfort that we have to endure for a little while. So that's my personal view, but there is another view out there.
So sorry. So to sum up, the hijab rules still be enforced.
They still be enforced, yes. Yes. Wow. The least interesting subject to this group is marriage and family. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Next one. Okay. Last one. Last question.
But what are rules for adoption? Like, what do you have to tell or raise the kid or at a certain age?
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of confusion about adoption because many people say, well, adoption is haram. You've probably heard that, right? So this is where the confusion is. So adoption in Arabic is tabanni, and tabanni is a practice that existed in Arabia before the Prophet ﷺ came. Tabanni is haram. That form of adoption that was practiced prior to the revelation of the Quran is what's forbidden. Islam came and forbade that, mentioned in the Quran. What does adoption mean? It means a few things. Number one, it means you're taking a child into your home and you're raising it and you're giving it a good education. You're taking care of that child and it grows up, right? So that part is completely halal, right? It's generally in Islam we wouldn't call this tabanni anymore. It's called kafala, right? It's based taking care of someone. So Dr. Zainab Alwani, she's one of my colleagues on the Fiqh Council of North America. She runs IIIT, International Institute for Islamic Thought, in Fairfax, Virginia. She wrote a whole really nice article on it. I helped her a little bit, and she did the work. She has a beautiful article on this about kafala and the importance of adoption in Islam and how tabanni and kafala are two different things. But kafala falls in the category of adoption from the American perspective. I recommend, if anyone's interested, they should read it. So that's one aspect of adoption, taking care of the kid. The second aspect of adoption is claiming that this child is actually yours, like it belongs to you. And you're going around telling everyone else that this is my child. And the third aspect is this child will inherit like it's your actual child, right? These two are not allowed. Okay, this first one is absolutely allowed, and it falls within the paradigm of what we call adoption in America. It's encouraged, very encouraged. This one is not allowed. You must tell people that this is not my actual child at some level, right? You shouldn't give a misleading information that this is not your actual child. And you have to follow the rules of Islam when it comes to your real children versus your, adopted children that are living in your home. The fourth thing is, do you tell the child or you don't tell the child, right? And she did amazing research. We had a whole conference on this. So she did some really good research. Modern studies show that the earlier you tell the child the better it is for their psychological health. Even though people would think the opposite. It's like the more you delay it, it's better. It's actually the other way around. So it's better to tell them at some age. I forgot what the age is. But yeah, you do need to disclose to them, and you need to disclose to everyone else. Not in every conversation that you have, but basically, as long as you don't claim this child as your biological child, adoption is perfectly fine in Islam. Okay. Author is Dr. Zainab Alwani, Alwani. Okay, she's Iraqi. Ironically, Dr. Haif. Throw that out there. Yes.
How can a couple deal with differences of tolerance and madahib or varying levels of Islamic knowledge?
Okay. So how should a couple deal with the different opinions and different levels of Islamic knowledge? The best way is to try to so there's two aspects. One of them is what applies to you personally, and one of them is what affects the family unit or affects the household. When it comes to personal, neither one should try to enforce their other opinion on the other person, right? Someone wants to hold their hands a little bit higher in prayer, and one wants to say Ameen out loud, one wants to say Ameen silently. There's no need to debate about this. This is between you and Allah, as long as they're following a valid opinion. When it comes to things that are going to affect the family unit as a whole, that's where you need to have some level of compromise. One of the easiest things to do is basically select a mentor, like select a scholar that each of you recognizes and respects. And when you have a difference of opinion, you go to these two people and say, this is our issue. We're consulting with both of you, or one of you, or whatever it is. What do you think we should adopt? That's the easiest way. If you can't work it out between yourself, just rely on an authority figure that you respect and trust, and you can get simple solutions. That's probably the best way, easiest way, inshallah. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. Unless you breastfeed before the age of 2.
Let's say you adopt when he's like 6 years old or whatever, and now he's a teenager. Hijab, like now the concept, like you're not supposed to be if it's you and him in the room by yourself, just like you're pretending you're not your son. You know, or like for example, like your brother or your sister, something like that. Is that not like?
So the 4 Ps, right? There could be some level of a slight level of relaxation on some of those things because they're living with you, right? But the general rules, the black and white rules, they should be adhered to, right? But the ones like being in the same room for like what you need to grab something, like you need to go and grab a book from his room or something like that, it's not a big deal. But if you're like in general household, like you're in a larger house or something like that, you're not exactly in the same room, and the window's open, someone else can look in, so there's a little bit more leniency in some of those rules, right? Especially because they're so close to you and they're living with you. Okay. Should we move to the next one? Oh yeah, I have a marriage seminar online on my YouTube channel. It's 8 hours. People are like, oh, never mind, never mind. All right, real quick, let's speed through these categories. I'll just do 2 questions on each. Divorce and separation. Like, how do I get divorced? Does a long separation of husband and wife automatically result in divorce? We'll skip that because most of you are trying to get married. All right. All right, let's focus on that first. Economics. Can I sell products through drop shipping? Can I work at the checkout of a grocery store where I need to process forbidden food like pork or alcohol? Can I invest in cryptocurrency? Can I get a credit card? Can I open a bank account that gives interest? What if I give the interest away in charity? These economics questions. Okay, any questions? Economics. You have not asked a question.
Yeah, mainly it's about like the savings accounts where they do interest for you, whatever.
Yeah, they pay you interest. Yeah. So that's the question. Yeah. So basically, first of all, you have to choose an account that gives you the absolute zero or least amount of interest that you can possibly get, which is usually almost always a checking account, the free checking account, not the premier, not the premium checking account, not the platinum checking account, the regular free 0% interest checking account. If there's not available for whatever reason, or they give you interest for some other reason, you have to dispose of that interest by giving it to the poor and you get no reward for it at all because it's not charity, it's disposing of it, and then it's going to be considered to be purified. Okay. Yeah.
What about in terms of student loans? How do you avoid that? Say for like, because undergrad, they're more likely to give you financial aid, but with graduate school, they're less likely.
Yeah.
How do you avoid interest when taking out student loans?
Yeah, so it's really tough, but there's two ways. One, you use your family and your friends, and you basically you don't get a loan, but you get a guarantee for those who have money that they will pay it off before interest starts kicking in. Right? That's a safer way to. I mean, that's a smarter way to go. Or they can just loan you the money. The second is organizations that give interest-free loans to Muslim students, like um, a continuous charity. It's one of the best organizations out there. Our local brother Mahi is one of the big like I think he's an organizer, a supporter, or whatever. So a continuous charity has helped many people avoid student loans. There's also programs that you can enroll in that get you through the more expensive schools, like even medical school. Like so, there are people who you want to specialize in something, but if you go in this other field, the government will give you some subsidy or something else. You have to make some sacrifices in order to avoid interest to the extent that you can. So we should utilize all those alternatives. So um, I don't know which one of you hasn't asked in a while. Okay, okay, okay. So it's not about marriage the whole time. Okay, alhamdulillah.
So, what is a waqf? And can you talk about how we can tell these things outside?
Yeah, waqf is an endowment, and an endowment basically means you're giving an amount of money to charity in something that actual thing, like let's say you buy a land or something like that. That land is going to be used in charity, but this thing continues to produce more and more charity so that it continues to help other people for a longer period of time. So it becomes a continuous charity. Um, so how do you establish something like that? So it has to be through the niyyah, the intention of the donor, and they need to specify what this is supposed to be used for, how it's going to be maintained and upkept. So for example, masjids are like waqfs. If you were to say, you know what, I want to donate $100,000 in charity, I could give it as a one-time donation, but I want it to continuously last for a longer period of time. I'm going to buy a house, right? Obviously not in Irvine because you can get a cardboard box in Irvine. But let's say you buy it in Alabama. I'm gonna buy this house, and the person who's responsible for this waqf is gonna rent it out and gain rental income. The rental income is gonna go in to keep upkeeping the house, and the leftover stuff is gonna go to a particular type of charitable cause, and that's gonna continue forever. No one is allowed to take that over. No one is allowed to adjust the terms. No one is allowed to sell that house, with few exceptions, in order to reinvest it in the same thing. That's what a waqf is, and many of our Islamic organizations and institutions throughout history have been waqfs, have been endowments. That's what it is. Yes. The proper rule of inheritance is a 1 hour seminar. I also have my YouTube channel, but the summary is Allah has described in detail all of the ratios that close family members are going to get. So a wife will get 1/8 or 1/4, depending on if there's children, when her husband dies. A husband will get 1/2 or 1/4, depending on if there's children, when his wife dies. The father will get 1/6 or 1/3. Mother will get 1/6. So there's all these conditions and cases where this is how much the mother can get, this is how much the father gets, this is how much the son, the daughter, the brothers will inherit in this case. So what you have to do is you have to identify all the remaining family members after a person has died and see what their relationship to the deceased person was, and then you have to go back to the rules of inheritance in Islam from the Quran and from Hadith and calculate exactly which close family members that survived, what percentage of the estate they're going to inherit from. And it has to be exactly those numbers. You cannot be like, well, I always like this son better than the other son. You can't do that. mom was always better to me, and dad was not nice to me. They're going to get whatever share that's designated for them. And then you're allowed to leave up to 1/3 as wasiya, what's called a bequest, to other people who are not already inheriting. You can give that to other people who are not inheriting or to other charitable causes. So that's the super summary of inheritance in Islam. There's apps you can download actually that will actually calculate the inheritance for you. So the best app that I know, it's only in Arabic, but it's the best one. It's called Al Mawarith. It's not available on Android, I don't think. So apologies. Just gotta steal an iPhone. I'm kidding. But yeah, Al Mawarith is the best. And then there's on Ilm Summit. Ilm Summit has another app that somebody developed from Al Maghrib Institute in English. It's also good, but it only works on your computer. They can calculate the inheritance for you. Yeah, Ilm Summit and Mawaris. Yeah, Al Mawaris. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, riba free bank account. So I answered that already. I answered that one. I answered that you got to do the free checking account. But if you're saying like a 100% riba free bank where they don't loan your money out on riba at all, like it's like the 100% halal model, it only exists in Europe. It's called JAK Bank. And what's ironic about it is it's run by kuffar. So the only halal 100% halal bank is run by non-Muslims. It's called JAK Bank, and it's basically a model where you keep your money in there, you gain credits, and then you take out an interest-free loan based upon the credits that you've built up over time. Go to any major bank. So the top banks right now, number one is last I checked was JP Morgan Chase. Number two is Bank of America, and number three, I forgot what number three is. But yeah, then there's all the other smaller banks there. So in terms of their market capitalization, all that. So go to the top banks and just say, I want to open a interest-free checking account, and just get one that doesn't give you any interest. So yeah, that's the best you can do right now. They're still gonna loan your money out on interest because we live in a fractional reserve banking system. They're gonna loan it times 10, but there's nothing you can do about that. So you just do the best you can.
So can I feel like put it about free this way?
Yes. So, other questions? All right. I guess the last thing is beliefs. There's one last category. So beliefs. How do I convert to Islam? Do I have to say the Shahada in public, or can I do it in private? When does a virtuous act become a bid'ah, a sinful innovation? Where is Allah? What is the Dawoodi Bora sect, and what do they believe? Or like some other random group, who are the Khawarij and what are their beliefs, or something like that? Does anyone have any questions on beliefs? You do? Go ahead. Awliya? Okay, so awliya means, wali means friend in this context, has many different meanings, but in this context it means friend. So awliya means the friends of Allah, people who are very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do we believe in this concept? Yeah, of course. The most pious people on earth are friends of Allah. That's a term that's given. They're wali of Allah. The question is, who are they? Only Allah knows, right? Only Allah really knows. We can't you can judge based on someone's outward actions. You're like, this person, wow, they pray such amazing prayer and they're fasting every day, which you're not supposed to do, by the way. You have to fast every other day minimum, but I mean maximum. But you don't really know who they are. So here's the thing: the concept is true. There are awliya of Allah. Our recognition of who is a wali of Allah it can be problematic. It's a hit or miss, and sometimes people can exaggerate and make a cult out of, hey everyone, this is a wali of Allah. Only ask this person. Donate all your money to this wali of Allah, his foundation, and there's usually all like a bunch of what do you call them? Bunch of bloodsuckers around him that are basically like stealing people's money and stuff like that. So you guys got to be careful of when it becomes like a cult. people will abuse this idea of, hey, there's a wali of Allah and we should like only go to them and they're gonna be able to do like some their du'as, like you should travel to go and meet them, whatever it is. So yes, the concept is true, but you got to be cautious about getting sucked into one of those cults. Okay. Good question, I believe so. Okay.
Like from the hadith that stem from like music is haram, like that stem from Surah Al-Quran, like it explicitly says that if the music has a negative connotation or a connotation that leads to disobedience. But like if I just want to listen to like jazz music or like something that's just purely instrumental, would that still be considered haram?
Okay, so there's nothing in the Quran which states this concept that you mentioned about if the music leads to haram, then it's this and that. That's a general principle, but that's not specifically mentioned in the Quran. There's some allusions to, some scholars have said there's an allusion to music in this verse in the Quran because it talks about people who purchase idle talk. And they're like, well, idle talk falls in the category of music. Or people who purchase vain, frivolous entertainment. And they're like, oh, the vain, frivolous entertainment is referring to music. There's no direct reference to music or musical instruments in the Quran. Some indirect connections have been made, but no direct connections whatsoever. So I just want to clarify that part. First of all, this has nothing to do with beliefs, by the way. But anyways, your question on music specifically. What if you just want to listen to classical music or you want to listen to jazz? What's the view on that? The majority of scholars have said that musical instruments are forbidden in Islam based on certain evidences that they came up with. Ibn Hazm and some Maliki scholars said that it's not. And they said that all the hadiths on music are not very strong at all and should not be used as evidence. So there's actually a difference of opinion on whether musical instruments by themselves are forbidden and prohibited in Islam, like completely, or they're not. That said, it's a valid opinion to say that musical instruments are not intrinsically prohibited, but rather the meaning and the lyrics and what the song is conveying and all of that stuff. So I think that it is fine, or it is okay to practice the view that the musical instruments are not intrinsically prohibited. Even if that's a minority view, it's a view that's strong enough so that no one should blame the other person and say, Astaghfirullah, I can't believe that like you're listening to Beethoven and Mozart and Pachelbel. Like this is like 100% haram. Okay. In your view, it's 100% haram, but there are other legitimate views of Muslim scholars who say that it's not, right? Among them, Ibn Hazm, among them Maliki scholars, among the modern scholars, Sheikh Qaradawi is one of them. He has a book called Halal and Haram fil Islam. There's a great book by my teacher. His name is Sheikh Abdullah ibn Yusuf al-Judair, ironically Iraqi as well. He wrote the largest research paper on this, 600 pages. He brings every single verse, every single hadith, every single statement of every single scholar ever mentioned on music. It's called Al-Musiqi wal-Ghina fil Islam. If anyone wanted to look through it, I'm just giving you the reference. But yeah, so does that answer the question? Do we have to end? I mean, I can stick around, but like, do we have to? Who's the organizer here? Is there an organizer?
I mean, we don't have to end at a specific time.
Okay, so should we just keep going, and anyone who needs to leave, they can just leave?
Yeah, I mean, do you have an idea, just so we know when you want to talk about it?
I mean, I gotta work in the morning, but I'm good. Like I'm good till 10, like at latest. Like I gotta sleep at 10. So
How about 9:45?
9:45. Let's do 9:45. Okay, inshallah. Yeah, in the back there.
This is about hadith that I found like kind of contradicts itself, but
Okay.
I don't know if it's the way I'm interpreting it, but sahih, sometimes they say things like anyone who has an ounce of heart or pride in their heart will be set to hellfire, or it can be like anyone who will read Ayatul Kursi after every prayer, nothing can stop them from going to Jannah. So how is it that these two hadiths are sahih and correct, but we could possibly have both at the same time?
Yeah. So the question, I'll repeat it. So the question is about, there's a hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if you have even like a speck of arrogance in your heart, you cannot enter paradise. But then there's another hadith which says, like, if you do, this good deed, or, you will automatically go to Jannah, to paradise. So how do you reconcile between something so small and you have to go to hellfire, and something so small and you have to go to Jannah? What happens if you do both? Like, how does this work? So this is the thing, is that people take these hadiths too literally, and they're not supposed to take them literally. So these hadiths fall into a category known as targhib and tarhib. Targhib means encouragement, and tarhib means discouragement, or like threat or warning. So when the Prophet, peace be upon him, is talking in these hadiths, he's using hyperbole. Hyperbole, spelled hyperbole, but hyperbole is exaggeration. And exaggeration means it's a style of speaking where you are, like, if you tell someone, man, if you tell your kids, for example, like, you know what, don't cross the street on your own. If you cross the street on your own, you're going to get hit by a car. Now, they took that literally, and they walked across the street. See, mom, see, dad, you are lying. I crossed the street and I didn't get hit by a car. Like, no, I was using hyperbole. I was saying there's a significant risk that you might get hit by a car, so I use this language to kind of warn you to not do something like that. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. He's saying, if you have arrogance in your heart, then this is something that's so significant, it's going to lead you down the path towards hell, and it's going to lead you down the path where you're not going to be able to enter Jannah, possibly. Right? Likewise with the other way. So these statements, according to all scholars who gave interpretations on them, they never took them literally. They took them as hyperbole, because they fall in the category of the Prophet trying to encourage people to do good deeds very strongly, or discouraging them from doing bad deeds. Okay? Yes.
Question about conversion for the sake of marriage. For example, so you're allowing want to get married, but the stipulation is that someone converts to Islam first. Is the nikah valid if they don't truly believe?
Okay. So the question is, somebody converts just for the sake of marriage, becomes Muslim for the sake of marriage, but they don't genuinely believe, and they don't genuinely believe, is the nikah valid? The answer is no. If you know that they don't truly believe. Now, if the person claims that they believe, but you're so here's the thing. So many people, there are several people who accept Islam for the purpose of marriage, but that becomes a catalyst for iman to really enter into their heart, right? So we should never discount that, hey, you just converted to marry that girl or marry that guy or whatever it is. We should never discount somebody's belief. But if they're openly telling you that I don't believe in this at all, I'm just going to pretend so that your parents show up to the wedding and I don't have to deal with all this drama or whatever it is, that should never be done. But if the person is saying, well, you know what, I want to accept Islam so I can marry this person, and we're going to do the shahada, the conversion, and the marriage on the same day at the same time, like 5 minutes distance from each other, I think that's a horrible idea, personally, but it's valid. So some things which are valid are still horrible ideas. So what I generally tell people is, you should accept Islam 1 week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, 6 months earlier, and try to learn, try to be genuine, so that you distance the two, so that your intention can be sincere. And you talk about sincerity. So yes, that marriage is valid. Even if the marriage is like right on the spot and conversion happens at the same time, the marriage is valid. But if someone is telling you openly, I don't believe in any of this stuff, I'm just doing it to show other people, and you know that, then that marriage is not going to, if the spouse knows that, that marriage is not going to be valid, if it's obviously, if it's a guy who's converting. in the back.
Can I have a question about the janaza prayer?
Yeah.
Can we pray janaza on somebody who died in like another area? So if somebody died like cross country, I would be able to make the janaza prayer.
Yeah. So this is called Salatul Ghaib, which means if somebody died and you want to perform the funeral prayer, the janazah prayer for them, but the body is not present, can you do it? So there's scholars have differed. So the Hanafi and Maliki school says you cannot do it. The Shafi'i and Hanbali school says you can do it. My personal view is that it should not be done. Why would they say something like this? It's because the Prophet, he performed this prayer one time in his life for Najashi. Najashi was the Negus, he was the king of Abyssinia, he accepted Islam, but he was so far away, and the reason why, according to the first view that I mentioned, the reason why he did it only for Najashi is because they weren't Muslims to perform the funeral prayer. So that's an exceptional situation. And so I think just on a practical level, it should never become a common practice in the community. Because you know what happened? Imagine Islamic Center of Irvine. It's like we are going to start performing funeral prayers in absentia for anybody who requests their family member. Man, everyone's going to come. My father in Somalia died. My cousin in Pakistan died. We're going to have a funeral prayer, like every single prayer. That's not going to be, a good practice for the community. So yeah, there's a difference of opinion, but I lean towards the view that it shouldn't be done unless the body is present. Who has not asked a question? You've not asked a question, right? Okay, go ahead.
Could a deaf person pray in sign language, and if they were to like draw prayer or just generally pray in the masjid, would it still be valid even though they can't actually hear something?
So the first one is, can they pray in sign language? It would be better if they just. Is the reason why they're doing it is because when they move their lips, it's not able to register to themselves somehow. Like, why would they do the sign language exactly for prayer? Why not just do the motions of the prayer?
That they're completely mute or 100% deaf, like they can't hear anything. So when they speak, it comes out like really weird, kind of like mumbly in a way.
Oh, they're mute as well. Okay, I need a little bit more information to give a proper answer. In this situation, are they able to formulate thoughts though still that are like coherent? I'm assuming they can make coherent thoughts. So okay, let me just give this answer. If they can formulate coherent thoughts, then the requirement of whispering to yourself is overlooked. They would be able to just pray in their mind. That's better than doing extra movements, because you're not supposed to do extra movements in prayer that are not necessary. So that would be better for them to simply pray in their mind. The second question, what was your second question that you asked? Yes. Yeah. No, the prayer is definitely valid for them. Yes. So I'll come back. It's about that. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. So they're going to say whatever they can learn. Whatever they're able to learn from the Quran or the meaning of the Quran or whatever form that they can understand, they're going to just say that to themselves. Because there must be some level of communication that they have in whatever form it may be. So they're just going to do that to the extent that they can. You haven't asked the question. Go ahead.
From one perspective, I feel like you could see it as the some people interact with the gospel. Like, I would just try someone that is not.
Yeah, so I mean, look, the best way to explain, so there's two aspects. Do people exaggerate at the Kaaba? Yes, there are people who exaggerate at the Kaaba, and they shouldn't be doing that. If someone observes that and says, man, that's like, how can this not be similar to idol worship somehow? Well, the simple answer is to go back to what is the Kaaba? The Kaaba is a very simple building. It's the simplest building out of all the religions that have holy buildings. It doesn't get any simpler than that. What is inside the Kaaba? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I always ask this as a trick question to people. I'm like, what do you think's so special inside the Kaaba that all these people are praying towards it? They start guessing all these things. The original copy of the Quran, the Prophet's body, this, that, that. It's like nothing. Why? Because if there was something inside, then people would be like, oh, you're venerating that thing. Nobody venerates a building. There's never been a religion or a group or a cult or anyone that just venerates a plain building that has literally nothing inside of it. So that is sufficient to disprove this idea that, oh, they're venerating a building or they're exaggerating. It's a form of idol worship or whatever. Allah has already answered that and protected us from that by making the Kaaba what it is, and that is a super simple building with absolutely nothing inside. Um, you haven't asked in a while, right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So when we were talking about adoption and breastfeeding before the age of 2, that's only referring to the rules of hijab. You still have to clarify that this is not, it doesn't become your biological child, just when it comes to those rules specifically. Yeah. I think one of you has not asked the question, right? He hasn't. Okay.
So for those that are including their team quite late in their life, what are your recommendations on how to deal with imposter syndrome or shame, especially like in the community?
When you say imposter syndrome, someone who started practicing Islam recently and they they're like new to Islam and they've done like some other stuff. So imposter syndrome in the sense that you're feeling like you're two-faced, in terms of like you're not that practicing but you're starting to become, but people will look at you as like, oh, this is a really practicing person. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, or like not knowing enough compared to like people around your age.
Oh, okay. How is that imposter syndrome? Just feeling a sense of inferiority, you mean?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, when someone starts practicing and they haven't been practicing, alhamdulillah, that's an amazing thing. That's beautiful, right? And they should be proud. They should feel confident and that, you know what? Alhamdulillah, I've woken up and I've come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of feeling this inferiority complex that like everyone else knows and I'm like so behind, I just started practicing late in my life and all that stuff, I'll tell you two things. Number one, who cares, right? Number one, it doesn't matter who's late. I was just telling someone this earlier today. It doesn't matter if you started the race slow, very very slow. What matters is you finish the race strong. It doesn't matter if someone else had a head start. It matters where you are right now, right? So all the Sahaba, they were all converts to Islam, right? It's not like they grew up with Islam. They all came to Islam later on in their life. So that should never discourage anybody, right? That's number one. Number two, many, many times you may think that you'd be like, you know what, man, all these people know this, and I'm like the only person who doesn't know that. I guarantee you, half the masjid doesn't know the same thing that you don't know, and you're thinking everyone does, right? So I ask questions all the time in my classes and stuff like that. You'd be surprised at the things that people don't know that they should know. So there's going to be some cultural elements that Muslims will know because they're kind of like, oh, you don't know you're supposed to slaughter an animal for Eid al-Adha? You never heard the term Eid al-Adha? Like, we all know that. And then you ask them something about wiping over socks, something about, all these other questions that we mentioned. They don't know any of that. They just know the cultural manifestations that existed in the environment that they grew up in, right? So what you think they know all these things, but they know like 10% of what they're supposed to know anyways. So you shouldn't feel bad and think that you're behind or something like that. And many people who start late, they way exceeded. So I'm somebody who came into Islam later on in my life, right? And I was exactly one of those people. I would go to a khutbah and I would hear the khatib giving khutbah and he'd be like, you know what? And everybody knows the Khulafa Rashideen, and I'm just like, I don't even know what Khulafa means. I don't know what Rashideen means, and I don't know who he's talking about. And he's like, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. Until I got to college, I didn't even know any one of these names. Never heard of it in my entire life, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like I'm behind, what's gonna happen? And you know what? I realized I started asking some of my friends later on, like, you know what he was talking about? You know what he's talking about? People are like, everyone knows the story of Bilal. Everyone knows Salahuddin Ayyubi and how he liberated Jerusalem. Go and survey and you'll find out that 50% of the Muslims in the khutbah, they don't know. Right? And that's why it frustrates me when any time a khatib like gives a lecture and they're like, everyone knows this story. I'm like, no, sorry, man. Why don't you do some statistical research in this audience here? Everyone does not know the story, right? So the reality is, don't be fooled into thinking that everyone knows or 90% know or 80% know. Usually it's not. It's way, way lower than that. And I learned that by going and surveying people myself because I was feeling bad, right? And then number two, alhamdulillah, it doesn't matter if they knew. Now, because I read and I studied and everything, 10 years later, it's the whole situation has changed. So, alhamdulillah, you should never let that get you down. Who hasn't asked in a while? I don't know. Pick among yourselves. Okay.
Well, maybe it's not right, but what do you think? What's your opinion on taking cannabis if you have insomnia? Strictly for insomnia.
Okay. So we're talking about CBD or THC? Yeah. I think it's very weak. So I've done the research on this. I presented the fatwa to the Fiqh Council of North America. I presented at the Malaysian Parliament on this. I think it's very weak, and the research on it is weak. Insomnia is significant. Is a very significant impairment. There's no doubt about that. Whether THC is the long-term solution for insomnia, evidence is not that strong on that. So when it comes to CBD, perfectly fine. Doesn't cause intoxication. THC is the problem. Unless the THC is going to be used in a pharmaceutical grade in a way where it's not going to reach any type of intoxication and they make a medicine specifically for that includes THC in it, then it would be fine. But if it's going to potentially reach a level of intoxication with the THC, and especially THC being at 18 to 25, 28% in most dispensaries and stuff like that, I don't think there is enough of a reason to make an exception to the general rule for that case.
Even if you tried everything else, it's not for me, for someone I know that's really struggling.
So what I would suggest is that person goes to like a sleep clinic and someone who checks out everything that could potentially work for them, and they try all the alternatives, and then if that medical practitioner who specializes in this, not some pro marijuana proponent, right? But because I know many of them, but someone who actually specializes in insomnia, and they say, you have tried every single potential treatment we have and nothing else works except this specific thing, then it can be an exception to the rule, and yes. But the general rule, I would say no. But if they apply this process and this is what the person says, then yes. Guys, pick among yourselves, man. Who hasn't asked in a while? You haven't asked in a while. Go ahead.
My question is about the agreement. How does that apply if you're expecting a reimbursement and a considerable amount of reimbursement, let's say tax return, and it's your due date to pay like the zakat, and you already they approve your reimbursement that you don't have that money yet in your bank. Do you have to pay that zakat on it, or you have to have actually the money in your account?
Yeah, so once they've approved a tax refund for you, and you know that it's guaranteed and it's not going to be canceled, it's on the way, it falls into the category of a basically a loan that is coming to you. So yes, you have to factor that into your zakah if your zakah is prior to receiving that money. Yes.
One is a clarification on what you meant by midnight. Is it the middle of the night? Because, or is it 12?
Yeah, by midnight I meant middle of the night, meaning mid of the night, not 12 p.m. But like you calculate the time from sunset to Fajr and you divide by 2.
And the other part of my question is, can you touch on socks and prayer? Because I've heard it come up a lot more recently.
For women,
For women.
yeah. So scholars have differed on whether women need to cover their feet for the purposes of aura, like covering in general, as well as on whether their feet need to be covered in prayer, into 3 opinions. One of them is that it's not a requirement. This is the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, the Hanafi school. The second opinion is that the top part needs to be covered, which can be covered with like the skirt or the clothing that comes if it drapes over the top of it, but doesn't need to be covering the rest of it like wearing socks. And the third opinion is that it needs to be completely covered. These are all 3 opinions held by scholars, and they're all, pretty respectable opinions. My personal view is the Hanafi view, which is that it's not a requirement in prayer, and it's also not a requirement outside of prayer. 9:45. Okay, yeah, inshallah, we'll leave it at that. I'll stick around if anyone else has an important question.
Hey, sorry, everyone. Just quick thing. Real quick, don't forget conference February 8th. Tickets are being sold and they're gonna. Another thing is if you guys can and want to volunteer, see me or Mariam will add you guys to like a volunteer group chat for the conference on February 8th. And last thing is next week we're gonna continue with Chile. So make sure you guys come out again. And if everyone could just hold their chair and help put them away in that room back there, we'd appreciate that.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Yeah, you can end it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am new here in the